The Legions of Athena. Chapter 23. Athena sat alone in her bedchambers. Though it was well past midnight, she was still wide awake. She sat with her fingers intertwined, contemplating the events that were unfolding around her. Things were going so smoothly, too, she thought to herself in silence. But her advisor's death was unforeseen, at the hands of Perseus no less, an anomaly which had appeared from nowhere. She knew why he had done it. Removing Daedalus was an option she had considered herself, one she had felt ashamed for even thinking, but it was the most logical option. With his death, the trail would end. She had carefully kept herself in the dark regarding the matters Daedalus had dealt with, so as to avoid any involvement with the one chasing him. But if the storm that covered Ares and his men were any indication, it had not been enough. Athena knew of the hollow storm much before Achilles had warned her about it. In fact, Athena knew a lot more than she let on. For you see, the war that was about to unfold was not an unexpected attack as Ares had hoped, but a carefully constructed play with Athena as the puppeteer. Nearly a year ago, Athena had learned of the war god's plans for a secret weapon, a weapon with which he hoped to bring down the Aegis wall. As an added insult, the weapon Ares planned to use was one that her old teacher had created. Athena closed her eyes and remembered the days that passed, of her time with the Sisterhood of Libra, a group dedicated to true justice and led by her mentor Themis. Half a millennia ago, the name Themis would have been enough to make Ares run back to his hole, but now the name is but a memory. Though her title was as goddess of divine justice, she was no goddess. She was a titan. Being one of the few titans to ally with Zeus and his brothers against their father Cronus, she had held her kingdom long after the Titan War, though she refused to join the Olympian Council. Until about 500 years ago, her country of Justitia was one of the mightiest. In the continent, which consisted of a large portion of the current Martian kingdom, and even small bits of Minerva. All that ended when Ares attacked and conquered Justitia, killing Themis in the process, or so Ares would have you believe. But Athena knew better. She knew that Themis would never fall to the likes of Ares. She knew a darker, more sinister mind acted as the conspirator of her former teacher's demise. Yet unintentionally, it was her beloved teacher's work that troubled her now. For Themis was more than just a fierce warrior. She was also a brilliant scientist in the field of biotechnology. Her work on molecular genetics and DNA manipulation were years ahead of her time. The creation of many breeds of chimeras could be traced back to her. But you see, when Ares captured her kingdom, he had taken her work as well. Though he lacked the intellectual capacity to appreciate them, he did understand their value and had kept her research safely tucked away. That was until 2 years ago. When he realized that the war with Minerva was at a stalemate, he had his scientists dive into Themis' old archives to find something to turn the tides of war. And unfortunately they did, a beast that could break the Aegis. Only very few people knew of this, including Odysseus and Daedalus. Though she would have preferred to have sent Odysseus to gather information on the beast, he was indispensable at the war front. But she still needed a mind who could understand the progress in the creature's growth, so she had to send Daedalus instead. That was what the old inventor was really doing when he was captured by Ares. On his return, what the inventor informed her was frightening. The creature was already well past adolescence and would be fully grown in another half a year, at which point nothing could stop it. This was the time when Athena had set her plans into motion. She had proposed the truce with the festival as an excuse, knowing full well that Ares would not honor his word. She had been dancing this dance with the war god for centuries and knew him well enough to know he would fall for the fake honeypot. Ares would see this as the perfect opportunity to attack, thinking that she was unprepared. But what the red god did not know was that her entire forces were battle-ready and waiting for him within Athens. The plans for the evacuation of her citizens were put in place well before the commencement of the festival. Athenian legions had already converted the entire city into a stronghold, though not everything had gone as she hoped. She had hoped that Ares would have to cross the mountains, leaving his men weak and weary before battle, but the war god's benefactor had helped him there with the storm. Though she knew the vanguard would lose the first skirmish, she had ordered them not to linger for too long in battle. Most of the vanguard had returned as planned, though Commander Leos was an unexpected casualty of war. Daedalus had once told her that no matter how well we calculate, love and war will always surprise us. That was what Leos had become, a miscalculation. But the thing she regretted the most was that her most trusted advisor would not be at her side as the two largest armies in the continent clashed in the morning. Maximus awoke to the sound of loud sirens outside. He looked at the wall-mounted monitor displaying 4:17 a.m. on it in a dull green glow. He hadn't gotten a lot of sleep. Though he had tried to meet Achilles the night before, they weren't kidding about not being permitted to leave the West Tower anymore. The elevator had refused to take him to the tower exits. The doors just didn't open. Guess they were still considered a threat, especially now with a war at their doorsteps. Instead, he had headed back to his room to try and figure out the cube himself and had been up till 2 in the morning in doing so. But sadly, he had had no luck with it. The siren sounded again outside, and Max knew he couldn't just lay there in bed no matter how badly he wanted to. When he stepped outside, he found Mia and Rex standing in the corridor as well. Hedger's room was empty, though. "What's going on?" Mia asked on seeing Max, but he had no clue as well. The three of them decided to head to the dining area, as it had the largest windows which offered a good vantage point of the city below and the fields around it. As they waited for the elevator, Max realized that he should probably patch up with Rex. He tried to talk with his old friend, but Rex merely mumbled responses. Fine, Max thought to himself. If he wants to be stubborn about this, then let him. When the elevator door opened and the three of them stepped out, Hedger was already there waiting in a chair. The sprite looked even more heavy-eyed than Maximus. "You all right, Hedge?" Mia asked. "Was up all night in the library, I'll explain later," Hedger said in a muffled voice. "But first you guys might want to take a look outside." The sirens blared again as the three of them headed to the window. To their dismay, what they saw was not a pleasant sight. From the far corners of the grasslands to the northwest of Athens, a sea of red was slowly swallowing the land whole. An 80,000-strong army was marching, getting closer to the city with every step. The army Max had once been a part of, an army fully clad in crimson, the largest army on the continent and led by the god of war. Ares had arrived. Sunlight was just beginning to creep into the sky, but it was enough for them to see the vastness of Mars's army. "Oh, Scrug, that's the whole damn thing," Rex said. "What?" Mia asked. "It's the entire army," Max answered. "Every single soldier Mars has to offer. Only the recruits and reserves must have been left in Thrace to guard it. Which means that right there is a host 80,000 strong coming towards us," Rex added. "The largest army in the continent is marching at us. Heck, the only forces larger than that in the world are of the big three." "What about Athena?" Hedger asked as he glided to their side. "Hers is second only to Mars, right?" "True, but her forces are only around 50,000 or so," Rex clarified. "You gotta understand, Minerva has been holding Ares at bay because they never crossed over to Mars to attack. They were always on the defensive. Athena's been using the mountains and the valleys to her advantage as well. But if the armies were to clash in an open field like this, it would be a slaughter." Max knew this was true. When the difference in numbers were this high, there was no way Athens could win, no matter how many heroes Athena had up her sleeve. But he also knew that Athens had never been breached before. "You're forgetting that Athena has the home field advantage, though. As long as the Aegis Wall stands, the fight is far from over," Max said. The four of them watched the slow march of the Crimson Army towards them as the alarms still blared outside. Rex's mechanical eye began to move and twist in and out of the socket. Max realized that the Minotaur was using his binocular mode. "Look who's leading the pack, it's our old friend Diomedes," Rex declared. Even though Max could not see the barbarian king himself, he could make out that the host was being led by a chariot with 4 horses. 4 man-eating horses, he had no doubt. Maximus was not surprised by this. He knew that the barbarian Diomedes had control over the infantry during war. In fact, Maximus knew this formation well. It was called the Wild Boar. Bringing up the vanguard was the cavalry unit. This consisted of the chariots with mounted machine gun turrets and horses with long lances in their riders' hands. Along with this were a large number of centaurs as well, who wielded shorter weapons such as axes and clubs. Close behind the cavalry were the light infantry. This was the largest unit by far and consisted of soldiers brandishing spears, swords, and the like. There were a few riflemen among them as well. If Maximus was still in the army, this is where he would be. After that came Rex's old unit, the heavy infantry division. This unit mostly consisted of orcs, minotaurs, and cyclopses. There were also a few large humans in the mix, but not a lot. They all wielded large two-handed weapons such as battle axes, warhammers, and huge swords. This was the entire division under the barbarians' command during battle. But the army was far from over. Lighter vehicles such as jeeps and trucks rode on either sides of the infantry, but the true force of the Martian army came behind it. The heavy vehicle division, consisting of armored trucks and tanks, then lumbered slowly behind the foot soldiers. Scattered among them were the dreaded RAM tanks, each twice as large and armored as regular tanks with twin barrels that cut its reload time by half. During war, all these vehicles would be under the direct command of Phobos, the god of terror. Then there was the long-range division. This division was split into 2 and was placed at a distance from the main army on either side. The 2 parts formed an arch-like pattern that resembled the tusks of a boar, and this is what the formation drew its name from. The ranged units stayed well behind the infantry and cavalry units, and the lighter vehicles would be sent to defend them if attacked directly. The long-range division consisted mainly of riflemen and centaurs whose bows were often more deadly than a gun. The rear of the unit had long-range anti-air guns as well. The small number of mages Mars had was also grouped with them, and the entire unit was led by the strongest mage in the army, Deimos, the god of fear. Up in the air above all this, Max could see traces of the final unit, Mars's Air Force. There were no helicopters or jetpacks as Athena had in this Air Force. Instead, the entire unit consisted of the Stymphalian riders. The Stymphalian birds, or rocs as they are more commonly called in Mars, were large flesh-eating birds of prey with bronze beaks and metallic feathers tough as steel. They were larger than horses and could be trained to be ridden into war. The Stymphalian riders were a unit that specialized in just that, and their brutality was infamous across the world. Being one of Lord Ares' most favored units, it was led by his sister Eris, the goddess of discord, a fierce rider herself. The morning sun had just risen, and with it, the four of them saw the large, ominous structure lumbering behind the army. In the darkness, Maximus had mistaken its silhouette for a hill, but now the light had revealed it to be a floating fortress of steel covering half the army under its shadow. The airship was hovering low, only a few feet from the ground, which gave it the feel of a castle being pulled forward by the might of the Crimson Army. An airship, Mia said in shock. I've never seen one before. Not a lot of them in the world to see, said Rex. That's no ordinary airship either. That right there is the Athon, the war god's personal vessel. Which means, Hedger said, as his weary eyes widened in fear. Max knew what it meant. In the 5 years the war had been going on, the Athon had never crossed over into Minerva. Its arrival could only mean one thing, that Lord Ares has come to end the war once and for all. He would be doing it with his own hands. This has been a chapter from Book 2 of the new World Odyssey Series, The Legions of Athena. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.